You know me, Catman. I like a conspiracy theory. There is an allegation going around about your favourite artist, Taylor Swift. She went to a New York Jets game to drown out all the PR and SEO and criticism she has about flying private and flying jets.
I think that's the best example of people completely overestimating the importance of what they do.
I think he overestimates my abilities, sir.
A lot of the time, the best PR you'll gain is when you gain it organically. And that's when you know you've really done something special and it's something that people are going to pick up on.
I'd imagine most marketeers maybe share a similar view, but I'm going to disagree.
For me, content's always the answer because great content will carry beyond your budget.
It has to be told in the right way at the right time, but when it hits, God damn, it can hit hard.
But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward.
If you had $10,000 to spend on your advertising, how are you going to spend it? If you had $100,000 to spend on your advertising, how are you going to spend it? And if you had $1 million, what are you doing with that million?
I think we basically had this problem when we launched. And the answer is...
Memes and machines, this week we covered it all. You will only go as far as your dreams. The universe doesn't reward humility. What did we mean by this statement? Twitch have joined the party late. You can now do stories on Twitch. What does this mean for marketeers and brands? We went into a conspiracy theory, a Taylor Swift conspiracy theory about SEO, believe it or not. We talked about the 1%, how a single word can get you a 70% better outcome on your results. We spoke about our favourite ad of the week. Believe it or not, it was Norwich City. Incredible. And we concluded with a phenomenal debate. If I was to give Catty and myself 10,000, 100,000 or $1 million, how would we spend it?
all of the memes and machines you need to 100x your business.
Love that. 100, you should have said 1,000, but 100's fine. Catman, good to see you. How you doing, my man?
Doing very well. Excited to be chatting again. How's your week?
You just didn't sound excited when you said that.
That's just how I speak. That's the most excited you're gonna get out of me.
I don't know. I've seen you more excited. I've seen Catty up and down get more excited.
That's a Friday night, not a Monday morning.
Yeah, true. But you're in the middle of your day. For you, you're probably Zoom fatigue right now. For me, I'm tired.
Yeah.
I've been on a train all day. 6 hours it took me to get from Sheffield to London. Got a lot of work done on the train, admittedly. But still not the most comfortable place to be all day.
Well, did you get there? Did you make it?
I made it. I did make it back, and we are officially in winter. I got back underprepared, didn't take a coat. I arrived back in London and, ready for the cold winter. On that note, my man, I want to kick off, and I'm going to read a quote, actually. I wrote this, and I've started doing this through the week, so if I find something interesting, it might not mean much in isolation, but I find it interesting at the time. I think it's worth debating. Consider it's Monday. We want that energy. The quote says, "You'll go as far as your dreams. The universe doesn't reward humility." And this quote wasn't about marketing. It was about ambition. But it did get me thinking, we should be more ambitious with our marketing efforts. We're all after these iconic moments that transcend our industry, transcend whatever it is we do, and people care. What was the last ad that you saw that you thought hit that moment? Something big, audacious, bold, and don't say Barbie.
It was the last You put me on the spot there. I hadn't thought of anything.
Do you want me to save you? Do you want me to save you from
You
an
gotta-
awkward silence?
You have to. I'm just going to sit here in silence if you don't. Till I
Okay.
think of something.
So, as you know, I am a big MMA and boxing fan. And a trailer came out for the crossover fight between Ngannou, the former UFC heavyweight champ of the world, versus Tyson Fury, the lineal boxing champion of the world. Crossover boxing match. And I believe Droga 5 dropped a trailer, and I thought it was phenomenal. It wasn't the typical fight trailer where they've kind of become commoditized and you know what to expect. It was big budget, big film, interesting plot, cinematic, crazy CGI animation. I thought it was wonderful. And that gave me hope. And I'm sure they have a big budget. The fight is taking place in Saudi Arabia. We won't get into that. But it did remind me that great advertising can make people feel something. And we should always strive to do bigger and better. But I'm going to leave on that note because I think I don't want to put you on the spot again. I will ask you about your career. So you start in marketing, you aspire to do work like that. But we've said this before, that the majority of people end up working on, a carpet shop or, local car garage or some B2B business. That is the vast majority of people working in marketing. What advice would you give to a younger person that wants to get into marketing and they need their expectations managing?
Yeah, I think everybody gets pulled into marketing because they have this grand vision. They probably watch Mad Men and they think they're going to write, big one-page spreads for big magazines about selling cigarettes or Rolexes or Rolls Royces or Porsches. I think what people probably haven't seen are the people who write those ads, the people who get to work on those big tentpole moments. They don't see the 20,000 other ads they've written before that, which are usually for, like you said, in the back in the day, it was probably carpet warehouses, it was probably taxi firms. Today, it's B2B SaaS companies. Something I've kind of realized recently is, at some point, everybody's going to be writing ads for a B2B SaaS company. It's just so ubiquitous right now. And the reality is that's how you get really good. You get really good when you learn how to sell unsexy products. And the industry is just so much bigger now, and there's such a wider landscape. And so you kind of have, broader opportunities to work on all these things. But it's very unlikely that you're going to spend your career working on big, sexy, emotive advertising. You might have one or two shots in your career to work on something like that. And I think it's how you build and how you learn up to that moment that will set you up for those kind of successes.
So you've just killed the dreams and aspirations of any young person listening in. They were thinking, right, I'm going to get to do my Coca-Cola ad, my Nike ad. It's going to feature Messi. I'm going to get to meet all these stars and do really cool work that transcends culture. And you're telling me that you're going to start your career doing boring ads for boring companies. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. But anybody who gets to be paid to be creative should consider it a blessing. And even if it might not be the most creative, the most desired client you'll ever have to work for, if you're using that muscle, you'll have opportunities to work on those kind of sexy customers in the future. And the one thing I will say that, if you do have a kind of industry or a kind of ad that you want to write, you can go aggressively in that direction. You can start doing the work for those industries, and all these industries have a backdoor. If you, build an audience or you create something that catches the eye of somebody in the industry, then you can find yourself working on these kind of ads pretty quickly. But I think to really cut your teeth in marketing, you have to work on the unsexy stuff, because that teaches you the tactics. It teaches you distribution, ads. It teaches you the analytical side of marketing, because not everyone can just go write, 3 words in a Nike ad. It's going to be seen by 10 million people. You need to learn how to, write a paragraph about a Twitter scheduling tool to try and get people to use it. That's how you really learn how to market.
Yeah, I agree with you. Much of what you said I agree with, in the sense that I started my career largely working with radio advertisers, which would be logbook loans, selling sofas, against one medium, so you are limited. You're working within the theatre of the mind, audio. And I think I learned some very valuable lessons how to connect with people through the start of my career. And when I think about the work I do now at Fly Story, we get an opportunity to flex both, and I think equally are as important. We work with a lot of startup businesses. You have to be very pragmatic. You have to be very resourceful. Every single dollar counts, but you could argue you are somewhat limited. Unfortunately, we've earned a place to be able to get an opportunity, maybe not as much as we would like, but the big, irreverent, bold work that big brands, or the luxury that big brands grant you to start. What I would say where I disagree, I do think if you aspire and you're kind of you're romanticizing the Mad Men days, I do think you can pick a career path that means you are exposed to that type of work early in your career. So if you go on a graduate scheme for a network agency, or pick a Saatchi, a Mother, just, creative agency that is really well known, there's a very good chance if you can go through those walls and work through the ranks, within, a year or two, you are working on some interesting stuff. You're maybe not playing a big contributing role. You might have to wait 10 years of doing the grind, before you get a meaningful role in that creative process, but you will get the exposure. I think what you said there was interesting, backdoor. A backdoor into a business. I like that term. Your career's been a bit of a backdoor in many respects. What
Just series of backdoors?
Too many, Catman. Too many. What do you think? What do you think's good advice if you want to get a back? Or let me reframe that. If there is a back door, you're starting your career again, where are you paying attention? What back doors are you trying to sneak into today?
So,
what industries?
The only thing that being young really gives you an advantage over experience in marketing or most industries is, well, there's probably 2 things, but first is tech. So if you are young, you are probably more native to the new and emerging technologies that are emerging. And so you see it time and time again when new technologies emerge, AI, Web3, social media, whatever it is, the way that young people, people who are younger than 25, find themselves in the room with 50-year-old CMOs and execs, is because they have taught themselves and because they know how to use this new technology better than anyone else in the world. And so if I was looking to, work with a big company or get myself into a big agency right now, I would become the best person in the world at creating content using AI. And then all of a sudden you have huge interest from some of the biggest companies in the world because they don't have time. They don't have the time in their day. They have 10 calls booked. They have back-to-back PDPs they're running with their team. They're not thinking about how to sit down on Mid-Journey and figure out how to, be a great prompt writer. So every industry has a backdoor that you can access through understanding emerging tech. And then in order to actually execute that and actually to get in that door, you have to build digital leverage. Digital leverage is basically, how do I, bring value to the world digitally? An example of digital leverage would be building an audience, right? So if you build an audience, if you build even if it's a personal brand or an agency, whatever it looks like, there you have leverage. When you knock on someone's door, they see that audience, they see the social proof, and they're going to want to invite you in. A podcast is another great example. Can you be the person who has and controls and owns the audience for whatever it is you're trying to do? And so my default is always building a page, creating content. That's how I've opened backdoors to industries consistently. But I think it's really about knowledge. It's how do you know something that the person reaching out to you needs and cannot access themselves.
It's really interesting when you frame that as emerging technologies. I think it's just unknown unknowns where maybe the rule book hasn't been written. You have many advantages, and you're right. I think when you're not encumbered by knowledge, you do have a huge advantage. There's a Warren Buffett quote that I absolutely love. I've been thinking a lot about this in the context of AI right now. You know, if you were to ask me today if I could drop everything and had to start again, what would I be doing? It would 100% be all in on AI. Don't know the specifics, and we invest and are very curious about AI, but we're not all in as a business. And there's this Warren Buffett quote that really hit hard with me, and it said, "Opportunities come infrequently. When it rains gold, put out a bucket, not the thimble." Just kind of saying you kind of have these moments in life that are big. Internet being a huge one, social media being another, mobile another in the context, and generative AI feels of the same vein. Some argue even greater, right? So, I think young person or old. I don't know why I keep saying young person like we speak to young people. I just think if you have an opportunity to reset and you want to get some skills that are future-proofed, you're probably right. Lean into the new stuff, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's not an age-specific thing at all. It just tends to be those are the people who are looking for a start in their career, but anybody who's looking for a reset or looking to do something else, I think there's a lot of industries where you don't need to do 20 years anymore. You can actually fast-track your way to the top pretty quickly.
Yeah, it reminds me a little. We had someone leave our team maybe 6 months ago. They've got a really prestigious job in Web3, and they are being paid an obscene amount of money. And I think, I don't want to do them dirty, but I think they're like 21. And they are earning an obscene salary. Playing the right game. They're in the right game. Learn some skills. Dude, I got some breaking news for you. Hot off the press, better late than never, a social media platform by the name of Twitch has introduced stories, ephemeral content. They're kind of a little late. Stories have been around a while, had been homogenized across our entire social ecosystem. I can't think of a platform that doesn't have stories or haven't tried stories. Twitch are now coming. What do you think? Is this a good thing? Is this an opportunity? How should brands be thinking about stories more broadly?
Yeah, I heard that and I thought, are you sure this is not an article from 2 years ago? It feels like it's like I've heard this before. Stories is like now become like a default format for the way people consume content, and especially Instagram. Like you see a lot of people just consume stories now. They don't actually scroll on the feed, and it was Snapchat that really introduced the idea that actually we don't necessarily just want to consume permanent content. We want to see what people have been up to in the last 24 hours. And that desire for real-time, recent content, I think is just like a human nature. So it makes sense for all these platforms to have this. Twitch is interesting, where I don't really understand where it fits in with the context of their consumer behavior. In the same way YouTube trialed doing stories. I don't know if they still have that or they tabled it. Same with Twitter. They had fleets, and again, they tabled that. That didn't work out because the way that you consume content on this platform is just inherently different. People will watch a Twitch stream for 2 to 3 hours, right? They'll sit down. They're not opening their Twitch app to consume passively to see what their latest streamer is up to. This is, I imagine, Twitch's attempt at preventing their streamers from promoting off-platform. So if they can actually have their streamers promoting their streams on their stories as opposed to on Twitter or on Instagram, which is what they do now, then I guess they get to capture some more of the revenue and some more of the traffic. And I think this just underlines for brands the importance of stories. It is now how, a major way that people want to consume content. It is definitely one of the least, I think, one of the more forgotten about avenues, particularly on somewhere like Instagram where, you can have almost half of your audience watching your stories. But right now, I think brands don't really know how to retain viewers on there. They'll quickly find that their stories are buried, and anybody knows anecdotally they don't watch all of their stories on a given day. There's usually half of their accounts that they never view. And occasionally when you have like one of those really bad days where you're spending so much time on Instagram, maybe you're hungover, and you end up actually watching all your stories. You go to like the end, and there are people on there who you forgot about. You're like, oh my God, I haven't seen this person's stories, like some friend from high school or whatever. Or you find brands, and they're kind of in your stories graveyard, where they're just low on the priority of your algorithm. And I think a lot of brands end up there. They end up in the stories graveyard where most of their audience never see them, and that's because they don't understand how to play the story game right.
Yeah, it's the graveyard's a really good analogy because it's reflective of the negative impressions of bad or an ineffective marketing. We've discussed this before, whereby you can ruin a YouTube channel very easily by shifting the format. So if you put very short videos when an average viewer is expecting a long form video, you can basically fuck your algorithm. Super easy. It's even easier to do that in stories. How many times as a social media manager felt the pressure to just put up some trash sales offer that had no value to the audience because someone asked them to do so? In turn, that switches off 90% of their audience, and they will never return to that top first 15, 20 people that you make it. I believe the average viewing sitting in Instagram is something like 4 minutes, 5 minutes. And you can only get through so much content. You may have a little bit of time on feed, within Reels. You'll spend a fair bit of time on stories, but you're only getting through 10, 12 people.
Sure.
Something we used to do a lot of, and it's probably worth us discussing, because I agree with you on the point around Twitch. I don't know the role it will play yet, other than create more ad inventory for Twitch, more opportunity to sell stuff. So I suppose that's cool, more ad placements. But beyond that, I'm not sure of the value just yet. But I will say one of the algorithmic hacks that I believe is really important is getting people to engage with your stories. So it's really important when you have people's attention, use the on-platform features. We used to do games like Your Call. So we would play a clip and we would say, what happens next? There's a cliffhanger, vote here, left or right. And then something would happen and the reveal. And every time you were encouraging people to interact with your story, you're signaling to the algorithm that this is interesting content, and you're then much more likely to appear in that top of fold. You're going to appear in that first runway. So I think it's really important. You are right in the obsession with short form content, TikTok first content production. I'm not hearing brands talk about stories as much. And it probably is a reasonable opportunity for brands to pay more attention and refine their ephemeral strategy.
And a lot of the time, there's actually better call to action tools. So it's easier to drive someone to a link from a story than it is a post. And you can actually get real-time feedback. You can get responses, you can get replies, you can get people to vote. It's actually a much, more two-way. It's much more of a two-way communication channel than posting to feed. I think what you said is exactly right, getting people to interact with the story. And then it's also just getting people to view a story. So that, I know that the time where stories get the most views is when the length of time they spend on that story is the longest. And so, one simple hack I see from that a lot is people will have a photo or whatever, and then some long form copy. Usually they'll split it up into 2 or 3 places. So they'll have half the copy at the top, then a bit more at the bottom. And what you're doing is just keeping people on the post a bit longer. Then that Instagram will recognize that. They will show it to more people, and eventually you'll get more people who view the corresponding stories. But you're right, like most brands just throw stuff up there. They're using it as a place to like share when they get tagged, and they're not really thinking about the experience of the user. They're using it as a bit of a almost like a clipboard to throw stuff on. But having like a very specific strategy around stories can be huge.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's got to be our tip of the week, by the way, because I think there's a lot of value in that if you were going to take one thing. You know me, Catman. I like a conspiracy theory. I've been known to go down a conspiracy rabbit hole. And there is one that I wrote in my notes that I want to read to you. So I thought it was great. It's a conspiracy theory about your favorite artist, Taylor Swift. And I know you're aware that Taylor Swift is dating an American football player.
Very well.
And you are very aware, of course you are. There is an allegation going around on TikTok that she is attending games. More specifically, she went to a New York Jets game for a very specific reason. To greenwash or to drown out all the PR and SEO and criticism she has about flying private and flying jets. So as a darling of America, she's often attacked for her jet usage. And I just can't see a world where she would fly any other way, to be honest. However, she has been attacked for it. And some people believe that she is using this game as an opportunity to get some positive PR and to flood out the SEO, the word Taylor Swift and jet with stories, with news stories. What do you think? Is that true? Is it plausible? Or are we just being silly?
I think that's the best example of people who work in SEO completely overestimating the importance of what they do. Nobody in Taylor Swift's friend group team has ever thought about her search engine visibility. And why? I love to think that's what she did. There's no chance in hell that even crossed her mind.
Don't shoot that down. There's part of me, I would love to believe that someone's pulled her in a room and said, you know what, Taylor? Got some really important business. I know you're a billionaire. I know you're, as famous as it gets. You're probably pretty busy. But SEO strategy. You are you're hitting some bad keywords. Jet. I feel you should change your schedule to go to a New York Jets game, and in turn, you will kill the story. What do you think? I don't know. I'd like to believe that could be true.
I mean, what if you typed in Taylor Swift private jet? And so I've typed in Taylor Swift jet now, and every single post is about the conspiracy theory that we're talking about.
Exactly.
So it didn't work.
Exactly.
It didn't work. So now you go on these articles and you read about her private jet usage. Anyway.
There is a broader point, though. There is a broader point. Using PR to create positive optics, and I'll speak from first hand. I'm close friends with a large fashion brand owner, and they probably receive an unfair amount or an unfair share of negative PR around some of their ESG credentials, so the impact that they're having on the environment. And this company actually does wonderful things in terms of social responsibility. Like if I explain some of the things that they do way more than any person that complains, I tell you that. But one of the questions when I was speaking to them was they are exploring PR now because they would like their top of fold search to be filled with more positive stories. How should companies be thinking about using positive PR to improve their positioning? Is that something you should consider early in a company's journey, or is that for the bigger, more established, stakes are higher players?
Funny. So my experience with PR, and this is specific to a startup, has been that we've got more value from the screenshots of the PR than we have of the PR itself. And so like being covered in a notable publication or a big name is great for brand equity. It's great for legitimacy. And, the social post about you landing that placement can actually usually do really well. And that actually is a lot of the benefits we've seen. And there are some like technical benefits. You want as many backlinks as you can in these big publications, and that helps your SEO ranking in other places. So there are some like considerations, but for me, PR does feel like a luxury. It feels like something that is usually a bit of an ego play for the founder, without being too general there, where they want to get their name in some big piece. They want to show people that they were covered there. But I don't think if you were to never do any PR activity, it would have a huge impact on the growth of your business. Obviously, that then changes heavily based on the business you're in. Once you start to get notoriety and people start to know who you are, that's when PR becomes really important, because actually a lot of the time you're just managing your reputation, you're managing your brand and the way people perceive you. But until you're big enough for that to matter, a lot of the time, the best PR you'll gain is when you gain it organically. And that's when you've really done something special and it's something that people are going to pick up on.
I think what you're saying is not a uncontroversial opinion. I'd imagine most marketeers maybe share a similar view, but I'm going to disagree. I think early on in a company's life cycle, PR can give them credibility that they can't get in other places. They don't have a brand yet. They don't have real reputation, particularly if they're going through a transactional event like a fundraise. There are meaningful reasons why the credibility that a authoritative publisher can give you is very advantageous. Do I think we overplay the SEO advantages and the domain authority? I think we do. But I do believe there is a lot of value for startups at the right moment. I would also say I tend to view PR for most startups as a sunk cost until it's not. It does take time, if you know the process of landing PR, to build a reputation with journalists. And when you get your moment, if it is big enough, it can be truly transformative. The big problem, and I'll tell you where the big problem lies, it's that most companies just don't have a cool, interesting, credible story to tell. The majority of companies aren't happy with their PR because they're boring, they're dull, they don't have a particularly interesting story. And if you don't have those things, PR people aren't fucking wizards. They can't magic up news that journalists care about. And if they can, it's disingenuous because it's like advertorials or trash publications. So you're right, there are no shortcuts in terms of PR. You have to have a great story. It has to be told in the right way at the right time. But when it hits, God damn, it can hit hard. But I do believe we see way too many misses. And marketing is always about choices. Are there other things I would spend my money on at different stages of a company life cycle that could be more impactful based on the goals? Probably, absolutely. But I'm increasingly a fan of PR. And I do believe in a future state where we may bypass search altogether and go directly to a chat interface like a ChatGPT or a Bard and just ask a question. I do believe the narratives we create online, either through social media and PR, could be more significant to our futures than we know.
Yeah, and I think PR will evolve beyond what it is now, right? Like people are getting their news differently. We talk about it a lot internally about this kind of like new PR, which is newsletters, podcasts, even just like social media profiles where usually are run by solo, creators. And like the old way was you go to this big publication. Now you go to, Lex Friedman, you sit down and have a conversation. You go to Stephen Bartlett, Diary of a CEO, you go to Joe Rogan, right? Like there's this new kind of media emerging. And I think a lot of time people can, I think it's what PR does really well is helps you craft that narrative, that story that you then take to all these distribution methods. You keep that kind of like consistent thread throughout them.
Yeah. The point I think what you're saying there is the media landscape is more complex, more nuanced. It is not now just top tier publishers that are the guardians of attention. It's now every media touch point, albeit podcast content, influencers, publications. And actually what you have to do as part of a comm strategy is craft your overarching narrative and understand what themes that you have a voice in and a credible voice, and you have an interesting take in the world. One of our biggest challenges, and we do a lot of comm strategy for businesses, is extracting the really good stories. And often when you speak to a company, they don't know what the really good story is. And I suppose a habit or a framework in which we try to help companies understand is right from a journalist perspective. So reverse engineer the headline. You've said this before. When you approach content, you do the tweet first and reverse engineer backwards, right? I do think the same logic and the same frameworks apply to PR today. What are the stories you need to tell? Don't try and tell too many. Pick 2 to 3 of them and then reevaluate them every quarter and understand where your opportunities may lie. And it's a game of taking short-term opportunities, but not spending too much energy on those short-term placements while working towards the big, meaningful top tier that, again, can be transformative to your company.
Yeah, I actually stole that framework from Amazon, and their framework was start with the press release. So there you go.
Wow. You got it here first. Catman is out stealing again. Started his career stealing memes. Oh, was that Dom? Was that you or Dom?
Was Dom.
I can't remember.
I made my memes. Dom stole his. Dom stole mine.
Throwing shade at Dom stealing memes. I want to mention something to you because we talk about insight a lot on this when we have our dialogues. And I want to share something with you. I was having a conversation with Steve the other day, and he told me that one word can make a 50 to 60% difference. And that one word is how he describes or how he introduces his guests on the Diary of a CEO. So bearing this in mind, for example, he will now test the introduction of a guest and A/B test Dr. X. Then he will say the stress Dr. X. Then he will say neuroscientist. And when he monitors those, you will often see up to a 70% variance in click-through between just changing one single word. So when I think about that, and you look at that small, seemingly tiny act, and it makes such a transformative difference. And for anyone listening, that to give you context, that's the difference between a podcast reaching 500,000 people or a podcast reaching 1.5 million people. That is the difference. So we talk about small changes that have a huge impact on distribution. How do you personally use insights like this to inform how you behave whenever you're doing content or marketing activity?
Yeah, it's super powerful. Being able to execute with content without guessing, I think is what this does, right? Like whenever you're putting content out, you're kind of guessing over whether the messaging that you're going to use is going to hit. And what A/B testing, what testing variances allows you to do is just turn the lights on, have a much clearer picture. So something we've been doing whenever we have a big product launch, whenever we have a big feature that we want to market, we'll spend weeks obsessing over what the tagline is. What is the one-liner that describes this product? We did that for like a year. That's how we'd launch our products. Then we decide on something, we'd post it out. It's actually the wrong way to do it. The right way to do it is to come up with 10 different variations, and then we run ads on each variation. So we'll run a very small amount of, literally put $100 behind 10 different ads, which all have a different variation of a different tagline for that product, different tagline for that feature. And then we have data. We run that for a week. We see at the end which tagline has the best click-through rate. So which one are we paying the least to get people to click through? And then that's the thing we run with, because a lot of the times you'll realize the thing that you thought was great, the line that you thought was genius, I'm a genius, I'm a wordsmith, actually is usually just crap. No one clicks it. And sometimes it's the weird, left field tagline that you didn't really think was going to be good. It's the one that gets the best click-throughs. So it's just kind of like opened my eyes to the power of testing these small marginal variances. And then you get you see that ad, had like a 5% better click-through rate. Well, if you scale that over the how much we're going to spend on this campaign, both organically and in paid, then the traffic is night and day.
The way you described that made me think we should re-engineer how we launch campaigns. Do you think a traditional campaign moment is a seasonal collection by a brand, and they will gear up, they will do all the creative in advance, no A/B testing, it's kind of concept theory, smart people all saying this is the perfect thing, they drop it, and then they pump money through that campaign. It feels like we're maybe missing a trick by just not having multiple variations and taking that performance growth marketeer mindset into big brand advertising. And considering the capabilities we now have with generative AI, where I can now in an ad change the text, I can now in an ad change the voiceover and replace it with another word. It feels like we're at an age in post-production where it wouldn't cost that much to do 10 versions of the same ad with slight nuance and slight variation. And again, doing that pre-testing period. I feel like that's the advice I'm going to give every single client now.
And ultimately, this can scale, right? Where you can use AI to come up with 100 different variations of the copy. And your data, your insight only gets better the more you test, the more that you scale it. And you can use AI to come up with like a ridiculous, let's come up with 1,000 different ways of saying this one sentence. And then again, you're not guessing.
I love it. I genuinely, as we were debating that out, I just had an idea for Flight Story. Anyway, that is parked. I better write this down after. I also have 10% battery, so there are two things I'm going to leave you with today. I don't know, I saw an ad relatively recently. It was for Norwich City. Don't ask me when the last time I saw a Norwich City ad. But what this ad was a classic switch and bait. So for a World Mental Health Day, Norwich City dropped a really simple ad. Imagine in frame, two guys sat next to each other, watching football week in, week out. So they're sat in their chairs. One of them's miserable, one of them's happy. And at the end of the ad, you believe that the unhappy person is the person with the problem. But the switch and bait is the happy person is actually the person with the problem and had sadly taken their own life. So really powerful emotive advertising, classic story arc. The question I have for you is, did you see the ad and did you like it? But B, how do you feel about brands dropping on moments like World Mental Health Day? Is that a good thing, or is it disingenuous to try and take advantage of that? I don't know.
Well, I think it was a brilliant ad, and it, one of the few ads that has stuck with me over the past few weeks. You asked me that at the start of the podcast. Maybe that should be my answer. But I thought it was a brilliant ad, and I think, like you said, anything that kind of anything that takes your mind on a journey and then switches it at the last moment is just immediately memorable. and stays with people. I think that's why it did so well. And I think like running something on a day like that, attaching yourself to a day like that, I think it's genuine if you bring value to the cause. And they brought value by telling a story that introduced the cause to more people. More people knew about the day. More people probably donated as a result of that ad. Probably more people donated as a result of that ad than all of the other activity that the World Mental Health Day, put towards that, because it gained so much reach. It cut through so many people. And so I don't think there's anything wrong as long as you are, you have a genuine reason to show up. I think football teams with men's health do have a good reason to show up. And if you, produce a piece of content which has a genuine message and isn't, hammering the brand in your face, then there's nothing wrong with bringing more attention to the cause. But yeah, I think when it becomes disingenuous is when they're trying to transact something from the cause, when they're trying to, ride the wave, or they're being reactive. This felt like a proactive piece of content as opposed to someone, quickly banding something together after. Yeah,
that's a beautiful way of describing it. You can't try and overshadow the moment. You simply augment the moment. And when you do show up, you have to show up well, right? I think that's the lesson. Great creativity will work anytime, but it has to be authentic. And that was a beautiful example for a number of reasons. Not a huge production in terms of production value, but just really well done, and took on, an important issue, because as we all know, I think particularly men have problems sharing their feelings. And there was real irony in the film, and I remember seeing the end of that and actually feeling something. It's a good ad when you feel something. Dude, let's conclude with our debate of the week. I have 3 questions for you to end. If you had $10,000 to spend on your advertising for Third Web, how are you going to spend it? If you had $100,000 to spend on your advertising, how are you going to spend it? And if you had $1 million, what are you doing with that million?
$10,000. I think we basically had this problem when we launched. And the answer is produce one great video and spend the rest of the money on distribution. So one great launch moment to get the word out there and identify 20, 30 influencers who can amplify that message. For me, content's always the answer, because great content will carry beyond your budget. It will be shared. It will go beyond what your budget can buy you. $100,000. Hire a social media manager. Again, it's difficult when you don't have budget that scales. My intuition always goes to how do you just produce organic content? How do you produce stuff consistently at a high rate and put messaging into the world over and over again? And I think that's what I'd do. $1 million, I would buy a parachute with the logo and I would jump off the Empire State Building. No, I'm joking. I would. I think $1 million is where I'd engage creators. I think I'd discover. The reason I would do that is I would run a big creator campaign, because this actually for us creators didn't work. So we ran a big creator campaign and it didn't work for us. But if it does work for you, I think you have the clearest path to growth right there. I think working with creators, aligning creators with your brand, is such a brilliant, scalable way to reach the people you're trying to reach. And so those are the 3 tactics I would execute. How about you?
Like it. I'm going to agree with you. If you have £10,000 to spend, I'm getting the dopest website money can buy and a killer vision film or piece of content to introduce you, because I tend to look at content through its lifetime value. Websites tend to stick around and be your CV and the destination where people go. So I'd make sure you show up in the right way, and your introduction film is the thing that can encourage you to help you with hiring or help you land PR in a future state, or the thing you're most proud of, it'll typically articulate what you do better than you. So I definitely do a good piece of content. If I had 100,000, I am not hiring a social media manager. I am hiring 3 upcoming, rising TikTok creators, like people that have gained a following. They have about 150,000 followers themselves. They're in my category, or they've shown an interest for the type of thing that I'm doing. I'm just hiring 3 of them. That's what I would do. And if I had $1 million, I'm just going to hire Flight Story. Just get right in there. Call up Paul. I got you $1 million. Make me 10 million from this million. That's what I'm doing, Catman. Selfish plug.
Mate, you got $1 million, hire me.
I didn't think we could afford you for $1 million. I didn't think Mr. New York City we could afford you, but
you get 6 months.
We can. As always, man, pleasure speaking to you. Until next time.
See you, man.